Sweet, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. It is a great honor and a deeply satisfying experience to bring to you today two people, hopefully, who are planting the seeds of truth and giving root to some eye-opening understandings of the constructs around us that will rip your worldview to shreds as the shoots burst forth into blooming realizations of how occluded reality really is. The works that Crrow777 have undertaken are years in the making, and now, with the help of the trusty and ingenious Jason Lindgren, the branches of enlightenment are ready to entangle the world. We're hoping that Jason hops into the call right now. He is on his way, hopefully. But before we get into the thickets today, remember that you can catch Rogue Ways on rogueways.org, on any podcast app, and on YouTube, and you can support the Eyes Open Network, a group of collaborators and producers like Benjamin Balderson of Odin's Alchemy, Steve Poikonen of Slow News Day Podcast, and Claude Furry of Talking Nonsense, by visiting patreon.com/rogueways and by pledging your support. In addition to some other goodies, you'll gain access to our super secret roundtable party of all your favorite hosts in the Eyes Open world. And we're also trying to compile a list of people who are providing goods and services of various kinds, also at rogueways.org if you want to check that out, hopefully in the very near future, so you can support people who are kind of working for the good of humanity and not trying to keep this horrible beast system going. So, Crow, how are you doing today? It's an honor to have you back on the show.
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. The beginning of that was a bit like digital poetry.
Oh, thank you. I try. I feel like someday I'm going to run out of ways to introduce people who I have on multiple times. So we'll see how long we can keep it going. And hopefully, like I said, Jason can join us soon. But to start things off, I think Jason just popped in.
I see him.
Hi, Jason.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm awesome. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm very good. It's good. I'm excited to get to know you more today for your first time on the show.
Yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun.
So we were just about to do the pointless question of the episode, which today I was wondering what you guys think about mud flood and the Tartarian phenomenon that sort of swept the internet world lately.
I haven't looked a lot at the Tartarian, a little bit, but I don't accept the mud flood. And by the way, I was thinking about it the other day. I think the first time I ever heard the words mud flood was on Ancient Aliens back in the day. So that should tell everyone something. If I remember correctly, they were up in Peru or somewhere down in the Southern Americas. And there was like a constructed megalithic site. And if I remember correctly, the guy there was using the words mud flood, and it just dawned on me the other day. So if I'm not mistaken, the first time I ever heard the words mud flood was from Ancient Aliens.
Well, that should tell you everything.
Yeah, a bit like muddying the water. And I know a lot of people get up. I said offhand in our last thing we did that I didn't accept it, and there were already some snide comments. It's like, okay.
People get very attached and their egos get caught up and their identity gets caught up in kind of whatever they're excited about at the moment, where it's like, it's cool to look into it, right? You should always be open-minded, but you should also think critically. And if there's, if you get information like the first people to mention it was Ancient Aliens, or honestly, people were looking at a CIA document that said something about Tartaria. And I'm like, well, they're looking to that as evidence that Tartarian information has been suppressed. But I'm looking at it like, well, maybe they slipped that in there to release it to make it look like that, right?
It's hard to look a liar straight in the eye and accept anything verbatim, is it not? So we kind of know what the alphabet soup agencies are about.
Well, Lindsay, I'll tell you, I wanted to look into the mud flood thing since so many people were asking us. And I live in Louisiana. I'm an hour-ish from the city of New Orleans. So I went out of my way to go down the French Quarter and walk around for a good 2 hours. And I looked at all of the old buildings. And if there was a worldwide calamity, I should see evidence in a place that's below sea level, like the French Quarter in New Orleans. It's very, very old.
Yeah, and below sea level.
Right, it's absolutely. And I saw zero evidence whatsoever. And that's all I can report right at the moment. I tried to tackle things when I can, and that was something that was easily within my reach, so I did it, and I didn't see any evidence whatsoever of any kind of anything being below ground, like it looks like steps that were buried or doors that are in weird places. Nothing like that. Everything was right where it should be. The cobblestone was right where it should be, all of that. So there you have it.
So so then I saw, and I didn't get to listen to the whole thing, but I was listening to a bit about what I think your guys' most recent episode, and you were saying, you were talking about this sort of phenomenon, because people, I think part of what makes Tartaria and the mud flood so appealing is that we look around and we see these ancient, beautiful, amazingly created architectural like art that's very, very old, and we don't do anything like that anymore. And I think that you guys kind of got to an alternative reason why we might not do that anymore. Do you want to?
Well, this is the thing. All these people who are researching these kinds of things, they're looking at valid evidence. And that's why Jason and I don't show up on some podcast and badmouth it. I don't accept it, but I'm not going to badmouth it. People are,
Right.
Looking at the evidence. Hopefully they'll get somewhere useful as they go through it. But I think one of the common denominators that people are coming to is absolutely, we don't build cathedrals anymore. Why is that? And I think the common sense answer is that there's a portion of history that we know nothing about, when people were apparently much higher minded, much more in tune with the natural world, probably more capable as human beings, and we've taken a hell of a fall. So I think, that is the basis for what people are looking at. But I think it's unfortunate that blanketing ideas come in. I think we'd get a lot further down the road if each person went at it individually with their own skill sets and didn't just grab a moniker like mud flood. But for the life of me, and I'll double check, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm reasonably sure the first time I heard the words mud flood was on an episode of Ancient Aliens years and years ago.
And we can theorize here that perhaps that information is still held by certain people. Maybe certain secret societies do know how things were done hundreds of years ago, but you're not going to see them letting that kind of cat out of the bag in this day and age, when people have the means to check things out immediately.
That's right. And if part of the agenda, which I think we all pretty much agree on, is that society is being dumbed down and we're being held low, it's not going to serve that agenda to let people know that there were higher minded times. They want us to believe that the further back you go in time, the closer you get to some caveman or some Stone Age nonsense. And it just doesn't fit the bill with what we found. And we asked the simple question in our last episode, how is it that not too long ago, maybe a few hundred years, hard to know because history is a lie agreed upon, we were building things like cathedrals, which absolutely are the most magnificent structures from my point of view. But it's not just that they're magnificent, they're encoding ideas about how the path of a human being can lead to a higher human being.
Yes.
And that's a long ways from where we are now, living in the angles of sorrow, basically 90-degree boxes and cubes and rectangles, which is primarily what we live in. And if there was such a time, which we know there had to have been something like this time, the buildings are still there, or for that matter, even maybe what would seemingly be further back, go to a place like Angkor Wat.
Yeah.
I mean, how do those things get built? We couldn't do that if we were funded to do that now. Could we pull that off? And, it's pretty clear that we've taken a hell of a fall here. And it's pretty clear that the people with all the royal pieces on the chessboard are pushing to dumb everything down. And they don't want you to be aware the heights of what human beings probably once were and could be again.
Yes.
The wrap-up the wrap-up takeaway you can get from our last episode with the Falconelli book and the cathedrals, the cathedrals show you a how-to. It's a how-to book in stone of raising yourself to a higher place. And that is the furthest thing any of the controllers would want in this day and age.
Yes. And I think that's really interesting that you're pointing that out. So this it's empowering for us to realize that each of us actually can better ourselves and kind of pursue a path that would lead to a higher sort of mind frame. But also, I think that's the key to changing the world back to a better place than what it is right now, is if people are empowered in that way. And I just noticed this morning when I was listening to part of that show that you're referencing right now, that your tagline, maybe, I don't know how long it's been this, but exposing the alchemical transmutation of the world mind into a fantasy-based reality. I love that. And it kind of gets to that, because it's kind of the opposite of that, right? Instead of like the person alchemically like transmuting themselves into a higher sort of being, the whole world is being transmuted in the opposite direction, I guess.
I think that message has been there since near the beginning, but it has been rewritten to try to better reflect. And even in the way you just read it back to me verbatim, maybe some people miss the idea that it's the misuse of alchemy. And I may have to try to rewrite that again to better convey, because alchemy, astrology, these are loaded words in our society by design. And it's a shame. So Jason and I spent a lot of time looking for new ways to describe very old things in a way that might be thought about. In other words, we don't say astrology anymore. We say the sky clock.
I like that. Yeah.
To get people to think nuts and bolts what we're talking about. But a big part of living now that fools people is a couple things. Being taught to think literally. That's the first problem.
Yeah.
And being so hyper material. And even our periodic table of elements demonstrates this hypermaterialism. These are supposedly elements that cannot be chemically divided in these types of ideas. Well, if we go back to the natural sciences, or what we probably would call alchemy now, there's 4 elements, and they're not things. They're philosophical ideas. And there's a 5th, if you want to include the idea of ether, which came a bit later, apparently. My point being is to understand the complexity of this perfect system we call nature. You have to come at it philosophically, because science is never going to describe the perfect nature that we all exist in. And so that's part of the problem too, is we've all been fooled into that science is the be all and end all. And unfortunately, science has become a bit of a religion. It's more scientism these days than actual scientific method in a lot of cases you can look at.
Amen.
Crow touched on this at the beginning, what he just said. People in general are so good at grouping all of these things together, and the bad guys, whoever you want to call them, love it when these radio shows and podcasts take all of this stuff and lump it together, because it takes serious topics, just like Crow said, astrology, we call it the sky clock. We're trying to distance ourselves from these things, because the same podcast that is trying to tell you that the Federal Reserve is actually a private corporation and on and on and on is going to talk about Bigfoot tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it all gets lumped together. It's like, well, this is all just silly nonsense. It's infotainment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then people can dismiss the whole thing very, very easily instead of actually investigating anything.
One of the big things that's occurred in my lifetime is the slow creep away from common sense. We've all been trained into thinking, and science plays a role in this too. Science and technology are constantly trying to convince you of all the magical things technology can do. And I'm here to tell you, from my point of view, no human being with their body has ever left this world outside our atmosphere. And if that's true, then look at what they're telling you about technology and rockets and all these other things. Jason and I have debunked nukes with the help of a channel called Hoaxbuster that demonstrates that Marie Curie was never a living person. There are people in our forums. Yeah, she's Mercury encoded. Marie Curie, Mercury.
Wow.
She's Mercury encoded, and she's supposedly the first person to discover a radioactive element. But it goes much further, because, Jason, do you remember the famous picture that S. Frog was bringing up? It's not Dresden. There's a famous picture where Marie Curie, Einstein, and all these notable scientists are there. Marie Curie never existed as a person, and these are the foundational scientists of our age.
Right.
It's all a
Einstein.
construct. Yeah,
Wow.
Einstein. You know, why is Einstein dressed the same way all the time? People will tell you, oh, well, because he was this genius who just wore the same outfit every day.
Steve Jobs.
I'm here to tell you that a common sense view would be, nah, most of the pictures you've seen of him were taken the same week or same day. It's a construct, and anyone who challenges it will find holes in this Swiss cheese.
Wow.
But the problem is we are so literal and so indoctrinated that to question Einstein, them's fighting words. And I'm here to tell you, no, it's not. You question any damn thing in this world, and if you don't, you're not being a human being, or you're not being potentially what a human being can be. We've all come through school where the main name of the game is memorize this, then regurgitate this, and you get an A. And I'm here to say regurgitation is not knowledge.
No, you're trained to just accept and move on. You're not trained to think or investigate.
The main
Critical
thing about
thinking is not desired.
No.
right, and the main thing about critical thinking and investigation is that you accept nothing. Nothing. You challenge it. If you can't challenge it now, you put it in your wait till later pocket without accepting it. And that's why we have the tagline, belief is the enemy of knowing, because belief is a choice. There's no investigation in it. And for so many people, once they believe in a thing, that will never change. And to unbelieve that thing is near impossible for some people. I have members of my family whose religious views or any other view in the world has never changed from the time they were 16 years old. Now they're up in their 50s. And that goes contrary to what nature teaches us. If you go look at that tree in your yard, every single day it grew.
Yeah.
While the person who just believed in whatever stagnated for all that time. So
it's like a continual process that keeps going and going. And I think some people look at that and they're like, well, that's exhausting. Like, when will I ever get done? Or when will I ever know? And it's like, I think it's exciting. Like, you get to constantly experience new things, and questioning everything is fun. You know, learn all the time.
If it's easier to sit down and watch Marvel movies, then that kind of shows where you're at.
Right.
There's more to life than Marvel movies. And when you're watching a Marvel movie, you're lazy. You're basically just tuning out for a while. If you want to get back to the real world, then sitting in front of a TV or regurgitating information, that shouldn't be a part of it. You're a human being. You're the highest life form on this planet or on this world that we're aware of. And with that, you have free will and all these amazing abilities where you can learn and challenge and grow. And that's much of what's been kind of bred out of us coming through, what Western school has become.
It's terrifying.
Jason and I just a couple days ago followed up. There was a high school in Indonesia.
Yes. I wanted to talk to you about this.
Yeah,
Awesome.
This high school and a very kind of enlightened teacher chose Crrow777 podcast episodes, each student a different episode, to do reports. He contacted me and sent me the PowerPoints that were made, and I was like, wow.
So cool.
So we agreed that Jason and I would go speak with them. Rose actually spoke too. And as we did it, both of us realized instantly that almost certainly there is no high school here in the United States that would have allowed that free discourse challenging so many things to occur. And yet here we are recording it, running it for members only because of censorship, providing that recorded hour and a half roughly back to the school, who will then share it with their principal to decide what they're going to do with that recording. And in the United States, we are light years away from that.
Yes.
I can't imagine any school district allowing that kind of free discourse.
No, that's exactly what I thought when I was listening to it, because I'm a high school teacher, and I was like, well, I want to teach Crow in my classroom. Like, well, maybe I need to move to Malaysia or whatever. Like, this is insane, because it's like I don't just get possibly flack from other teachers. There's flack from parents that I would get. My principal might give me flack. But also, this is the worst part, my students will give me flack. Like, the students are so trained that they will resist things that seem outside the box to them. It's like they're not just trained to not think critically, but it's almost like this built-in, I don't know. It's like when they get a chance to attack something, especially if it's like seemingly above them, like a teacher, then they're like so excited that they get to do that. It reminds me of like 1984, where the kids are trained to narc out the parents,
Yeah.
I feel like it's something like that. Like, so I would even get flack from my students if I tried to do something.
Well, that's a change in our lifetime too. When I was young in grade school and junior high, you did not even dream about back talking or mouthing off to an adult. That was your senior, even if they were wrong. And the few children who did that were like the rebels who were going to be in trouble all the time, kind of viewed as a dim future. But the point is when I was young, children addressed adults with a hell of a lot more respect. And what we find even in modern media and movies is over and over and over, the young people being shown how to be disrespectful to older people in the society. It's just part of the overall transmuting of our world through media. Without media in the way that we have it now, we'd probably have a much more successful effort at getting back to a higher minded civilization.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and
Media is the mind weapon.
Right.
It is.
Deployed as such.
It is.
I mean, it literally suppresses your brain waves, but like someone had said, and you kind of touched on it to some extent, when you're watching something like a Marvel movie or whatever, you're somewhat depressed, right? But it's like physically, literally, you're being depressed.
Drugging you. What happens in your brain in front of a television is nearly identical to what happens to your brain on opiates.
Jesus.
And that's demonstrable, whatever the correct way to say that is. It's not arguable. They can measure brain waves. They can show you beta and alpha waves. They can show you when your brain slips into a kind of sleep pattern. And they can also show when you leave your higher mind and go into the lower levels of mind, which is what happens to habitual TV watchers. And in that lower mind, you can no longer distinguish reality. As a matter of fact, your brain quits trying and just becomes a bit like a funnel, like pour all this in and I'll accept it as real.
And so that's where they get their best like mind control conditioning pushed across to us.
That's also where they do subtle things like convince you that technology is magic. I'm here to tell you that technology can't do nearly the amount of things you have been convinced it can. Nuclear weapons do not exist in the way you've been told they do. So the next time someone comes on the news trying to scare the bejesus out of the world that North Korea is going to nuke someone somewhere, I sit here and laugh. I'm completely immune from it. And the next time someone wants to, so many things I can point out here. When you get back to common sense and you've challenged these things, you understand that a big part of the modern age is introducing violence and trying to convince human beings that there are so many human beings out there that just want to kill or be violent. And I'm here to tell you that a human being or most human beings are not like that. Of their own free will.
Well, that's something that Freeman Fly often brings up too, right? That they've had to try so hard just to get people to kill each other. Our automatic kind of state is that we are gonna, even in war, they found people will, even trained to shoot, like people who have high accuracy will shoot above people's heads or around them and miss them on purpose, even though it's the enemy who's coming supposedly to kill them. And you'd think in a moment of self-defense, especially, you'd be more likely, but it was something really like 80% or something of people missed. I can't remember the numbers, but
yeah, I was in the military. You see it all the time, but there's even a more insidious side to all this violence that's piped in through TV and movies and these imaginary wars and this imaginary terrorism, like what happened in New Zealand yesterday. There's a blood sacrifice aspect to what we're talking about, which I don't really address in public very often because most people are just not prepared to hear it.
Yeah.
But when you get human beings in a situation like there's a military there and those people have been convinced they need to pull the trigger on someone, you are completely deluded if you don't think the death that occurs there hasn't been dedicated in the same way a blood sacrifice was. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, if you went to a butcher house that some mega corporation owns, do you really think that every animal that's being hit in the head with a bolt gun, you don't think that blood sacrifice is being utilized? I'm here to tell you it is. It's just very difficult to express the reality of that in some modern way that people can wrap their heads around.
Right. It's one of those things where people are just like, nope, can't even imagine that. Gonna walk on by.
I picture there's a reason, like the manufacturers of bullets, you look at the bottom and each bullet says Winchester. There is a reason for that.
Why?
Because that's who's gaining the blood. Gotcha. That's who's gaining the benefit. Yeah, that's who's doing the dedication or the claiming of the violence that was done with that tool that they created.
And this is part of that reverse sort of alchemy, right? Where it's putting this control system in place or reinforcing it or making the delusion more potent. Also, but then the reverse of that, where we can kind of follow our own path of making our own, of becoming ever more, I guess, like human and capable in the things that we really are capable of. That would be the way to then like resist all of this. And I think like the types of things that we're actually capable of are the types of things that they want us to think that technology is capable of.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean?
And for the average person, the biggest benefit for the average person trying to kind of break out of the steel box we're all living in right now is to get back to nature and begin to appreciate it, and then start to realize that the most wide-ranging changes that occur in our world are subtle, absolutely subtle. And we've all been trained to think that it only matters very much when a gross thing happens, like when a building falls down in New York or these other things. And the truth of it is people who get back to the natural sciences, the ideas of alchemy, the ideas that are encoded in those cathedrals, that is based on human subtlety. And it is one of the most powerful things that a human being can harness. And yet most of us are so far from even recognizing that as a possibility.
Right. Yeah, I don't know many people who are thinking about any of it.
Well, anyone who prays, that's the kind of subtlety that's been taken away from us. But if you're praying, it's in that vein, right? You're one person in a room thinking private thoughts. Why are you doing that? There's no one here to hear your private thoughts, is there?
Right.
And yet they are doing it. That is the kind of subtlety that is harnessed by the people who never lost sight of what was encoded in those cathedrals, by the people who always understood that the subtle undercurrents of this natural world are what drive everything.
Mm-hmm.
The thing to understand is that it's all about energy and intent. That's what the universe really is.
Yeah.
Exactly. And mind, yeah.
And what, just while we're on that topic, before we move on to something else, where would you like point people to want to get started learning more about that type of thing?
That's a tricky question, because depending on who you're speaking with, you don't know what their religious ideals might be, or it's a shame if they have political ideas. That's a shame. We've done a lot of work to show what politics is about. But these are the types of indoctrination mechanisms that shut down a human mind. So depending on who you're speaking to, finding the correct words that maybe they will hear and benefit from, it's not an easy thing. But
good point.
What I will say in a very general overarching ways is everything you get off a bookshelf from about 1940 something forward is what I call the modern edit. Every publishing house, every big place is part of the people who own just about everything. If you get back to older text, you get to a point what I call before the modern edit. The oldest maps you can get, the oldest books you can get, the oldest traditions you can get, the oldest religions you can look at. That is where you will find the breadcrumb of what we have lost. That's what I would add.
And I think it really is a breadcrumb, because I think a lot of those even have, like, even in writing them down, printing even a long time ago, there's like some manipulation that has gone into it too. But I think there's still that gold that's encoded in there as well.
You get back to the oldest writers, and to a person, you will almost always hear that any significantly old religion, any, has 7 layers of meaning. And the top literal reading of something like the Bible is there to weed out who you're going to be in society. Are you going to be one of the many masses, the average person? Are you going to go deeper? And by the time you get down to like the 6th or 7th level of meaning, those are very few people, very, very few people, partially because you need a teacher to get there. To get that teacher, you have to prove yourself sufficiently worthy to be taught. It goes on and on and on. But that's another problem with our world, is a lot of people have come to view the literal reading of religions as complete nonsense, so they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
Jason and I just did a whole episode trying to marry some of the biblical scriptures over to the cathedrals and the alchemical path that was encoded there.
Yeah.
But those are much deeper levels of meaning. If you walked up to a person to talk about the cathedrals who had read the Bible 1,000 times, and you pointed out to them that originally there was a statue of Saint Christopher, first thing you saw walking into Notre Dame, holding baby Jesus, would that person have any idea of what's encoded there? And
No.
the answer is probably not. But we covered these things.
I have a slightly different answer.
Okay.
I would say to start your journey, start with yourself and meditate.
Yes.
Before you ever start worrying about any other sources, books, whatever, start with yourself, and you will start raising your own consciousness. if you put forth the effort.
I think you're right. And I think like Crrow's saying, go back to nature, like do that in nature if possible. And it's probably even more effective. And I think part of what you're saying too is like, I feel like there's that truth to that idea that like, whatever you ask, shall be given. Like if you're genuinely seeking, you're going to find some answers, I think.
That's intention.
Yes.
that Jason referenced earlier. Intention is everything. Yeah. You see so many people online pointing at this. Oh, look, there's the number 33, or there's the Illuminati, and what they have expressed is exactly nothing until you can show intent. But it's not that hard to show intent in some cases. Like if something comes from media, the news, you already got your intent. You know what they're about. It's been demonstrated that they don't tell the truth, that it's all agenda. So there's your intent. So when you point at that particular thing, you don't have to prove intent. They've already demonstrated what they're about, to be perfectly clear. But one thing that people can remember is there's no lie in nature. If you go out into the world in a field where there's animals and trees and you learn something, you will never have to question if there was some dishonest aspect of what you just learned, because there is no lie in nature. And I would further point out that if we went back far enough in time, it is quite likely, logically likely, that there was a time when the only things that people paid attention to and what drove everything were the cycles of nature. And that's what we've come so far from.
So far, we're almost completely disconnected from it.
If technology has its way, we will be absolutely disconnected from it. And this artificial thing we call technology will replace it. And at that point, I mean, whoa. Just whoa, brothers and sisters, whoa, if that is allowed to happen. And I always reference Frank Herbert's Dune because he opens up that tale with a thing called the Butlerian Jihad, which is never really quite defined, but you understand that it was this galaxy-wide, if there was such a thing, which there isn't, war that was fought over computers. And when the war was over, anyone caught with a computer would be put to death. And yet still the royal rulers and kings and the Bene Gesserits always had a computer on hand that they hid, but it was taboo. Nobody was, walking down the street using some kind of a digital device. And I ask often, well, how did Frank Herbert even work that out to put it into his 1950s story? But will we get to that point? Do we have some kind of a Butlerian Jihad where we have to finally decide, will we allow our natural world to be completely just removed from our existences and replaced by this artificial thing called technology? And the problem here is the people making the technology cannot be gods of the natural world. They could never produce anything that perfect, and they can't claim ownership because they didn't make it. So this technology that they are making and that they are owning is what they're seeking to replace that perfect system with. And anyone listening can work out that men and women do not make perfect systems.
No.
This is the danger with the transhumanism movement. You're seeing what it is that they truly want to do here. They want to completely separate you from what reality really is, which is, of course, nature. And they're trying to make it all cutesy pootsy with little gadgets and things on your person. Soon they'll be in your person. Soon they'll be replacing parts of your person.
Yuck.
One thing to the next, to the next, to the next.
Well, we've already part of the indoctrination to that goes all the way back to pre-77, but one of the big jumps was in 1977 when Star Wars came out. All of a sudden, I could even go back further to Snow White. When Disney made Snow White, it was going to be the first feature film of hand-drawn cartoons, which, by the way, back in that day, a cartoon was recognized to be a low form of art. Yeah. But what Disney said is, we will not know if this succeeds unless we can see the audience laugh and cry. When that was screened, Snow White, the audience did laugh and cry, and Disney said, we succeeded. We fooled people into looking at imaginary cartoon drawings and expelling emotion based on this. Well, a version of that was done in 77 with Star Wars. When all of a sudden, when you were concerned that poor R2-D2 might be injured or C-3PO was in trouble, in fact, you had been deluded into expending human emotion on a machine as if it were something more, which it is not.
Good point. And there you see that like ramping up lately with all the ads of the Super Bowl were like almost all of them were targeted to try and make you feel like these machines have any kind of identity or something to care about, rather than just being like a hunk of metal.
Well, there's even a seedier side to all this. In the same way that almost all of the major technologies online were brought to us through porn, because it always made money and it always had eyeballs. The whole sex robot, sex doll thing is now
Yeah.
really becoming front and center, and that is a complete perversion of what it is to be a higher human being. I mean, that is an inanimate object that you're acting like you can share some kind of love with, and that's perverse on the
Yeah.
face of it.
It's really like sad to me. And people have this argument like, oh, well, people who would otherwise rape children can have a childlike sex doll and then they won't rape kids, so it's good. And I'm like, no, like, just like lost the entire point.
That's a bit like saying this merchandise on the shelf is damaged, but we can do this other thing to make the damaged merchandise acceptable. If you got a person that's going to go out and rape kids, guess what, man? There's a damaged human being there. And maybe a sex doll isn't fixing that damage.
Nope. And maybe it's making it worse. I don't know. You're kind of like giving it more energy and more time and more attention, and that's what makes things grow in this reality. So what? Yeah, it's really perversion. And it goes back to, I think that it is interesting that they're always using sex to push things, you know, because sex
always sells.
It sells. It's at its very root. That's our like main power as humans, right? We're our creative force.
There's no getting around it, because until you've become a higher human being, and if you want to accept that some of the meditative traditions actually figured out how to pull the root out of sexual desire so it no longer affects them, which is claimed in endless traditions. So I don't know why so many people will be lying about such a thing.
Right.
But the point here is we are here to make more of us.
Yes.
There's all these other things that a human being can and should do during life, but at the end of the day, a man and a woman make a new human being. And that's another thing that has come in straight into the crosshairs of media, the gender confusion that is so rampant now. And it's unfortunate because they wrap it in the idea of, well, these people have rights too. But you see, the problem here is if you're truly concerned with the rights of all human beings, then you say all human beings have rights. I see it all the time in churches where they actually act like they're supportive of gay people, and yet what they're doing is keeping the controversy alive by putting that flag on a church. Shouldn't the sign on the church say all human beings welcome and nothing more? Instead, what they're doing is they're subsetting again and pointing out, oh, this flag represents just the gay people and you're welcome here, gay people. That furthers the controversy. And at some point, if you can't get beyond it and just say, it doesn't matter if you're black, red, purple, male, female, neuter, gender, gay, not gay, lesbian, whatever the other 5 letters they've added, QTB, they're all human beings. So all human beings are welcome here. That is the truthful concern for a human being. It's a bit like the free speech argument, right? Everyone thinks our government protected free speech. They didn't. What they did was they said that the government can't infringe. So anyone who truly sat down for these complex laws they write that had an actual concern for the free speech of all human beings would say nobody or no entity can infringe on a human being's free rights as long as no one's injured. That's not what happened.
Change, like that could have solved everything.
They loopholed it because they knew that corporations were coming. So now the Googles and the YouTubes can violate our human rights that we are born with and get away with it. But I'm here to tell you, they may not be getting away with it in every way, in every way they think they can. They've backed off a few times. They've tried the iron-fisted thing. Now they're slyly shadow banning. They're removing, from my part, Crrow777 is removed from search engines. They deleted my channel to scrub me out of search returns. I went from millions down to about 60,000 even to this day. That's how they're going at it. But at the end of the day, it tells you 2 things factually. What's being fought against are ideas. That's the first thing you factually know is true, because nobody's being injured. And the second thing is they're damn desperate. Because if those ideas have become so powerful, they've got to turn into these underhanded, maniacal monsters trying to control narratives everywhere. It demonstrates to you that they're desperate.
Didn't they also try to target your Skype conversation with the school that you were doing the work with?
They successfully blocked us. I got on Skype and Jason got on Skype. As I sat there, a new update came in, and I said to Jason before we ever got on with the school, because we were going to do a test run to make sure everything was okay, I said, Jason, I just had an update come here. Do you suppose they're going to block this conversation? Meanwhile, Min is over in Indonesia trying to get on Skype. When he opens it up, he is forced with an update and it crashes his box. We waste about half an hour before we went to what we'll just call as a different method. And we finally make the connection with a different method, which we won't name. And over the course of an hour, 15, 20 minutes, the quality of that call went from pretty good to pretty terrible.
Yep. And people don't believe that
surprise.
this is how targeted that they get, but it's like you were singled out a long time ago, and all they have to do is send a little pre-made like malware packet your way or whatever, and it does all these things, you know. It's not like they have to sit there and manually like type things in as you're doing it. It's like it's just taken care of.
People will recognize that a couple days ago, supposedly YouTube crashed. We'd been watching things go on days running up to this, where Jason and I were getting ready to put out certain episodes. The Indonesian school was one of them, and Google blocked me for the first time from sending files to Jason for production. We had to use, again, in quotes, other methods to get files to one another. And that happened a couple days before the crash, but a couple days. So over the course of about 4 days, we noticed all these things going on YouTube with Gmail. And if I had to venture a very educated guess, I would say that what they've done now is move towards censorship at the source. In other words, when you do any kind of communication from your box, the moment it is using a system to leave your box, it's already been quantified and it's already been controlled in one way, shape, or form.
It's almost like how a virus program would work on your computer. Like as something might be coming in, it's looking at it, identifying it, and it's seeing what it thinks about it. But it's like the other way as it's going out.
Well, it's already worse because, like, if you take an email, you know, everyone understands that an email gets encoded into packets. What used to happen, and I don't know if this even happens anymore, is an email gets shot out in 1,000 directions. The first packet that makes its destination becomes the delivery route for all the packets that make up that individual email. Okay. So that tells you that the system or service that is providing the email is taking your message, breaking it down into packets, right? It is at that point, I am contending now, as it gets processed at that initial step, that it is being examined for censorship and control. And the email's one example. I don't give a damn if you're using Twitter or Facebook or anything else. And the other big thing they're doing is, I guess, what we're calling shadow banning, but it's way beyond that, where you might go to a place and comment and you see your comment post, and then you even see some people respond to it, when in fact what's happened is you're the only person that sees your own comment, and all the responses to that comment are just made up nonsense.
They're fake.
Same thing with a video. So Crrow777 goes to his YouTube channel, he puts up a video, and lo and behold, I see 1,000 people. It's quite possible that 100 people saw it when I'm seeing 1,000. And all those comments, Jason and I have talked about this endlessly. Half of the troublemaking comments come from what we call sock puppet channels, which are almost certainly AI or bots. And I can smell them. I can physically smell them. And there are rules that I guess I don't talk about too much in public, because it's part of what I apply to measure whether it fits the criteria. And I'd say about 80% of the time I'm spot on before I ever investigate.
Wow. Yeah, that's advanced, and it's worrying, and especially when you're talking about it being at even the email level. Because even in our group, the Eyes Open group, we were talking about, when this is shut down, like how do we still keep in contact? And now we're doing an email list, and it's like that's not going to work either.
Well, no, it's not. To some degree, I mean, there's price services. I don't know how good Hushmail or these other things that people might go, but for my part, I opted to not hide from Google. I'm not hiding at all, and the reason for it is because I have nothing to be ashamed of. I've conducted myself above board. I've never harmed anyone. I never will harm anyone. So if you want to come violate my rights, you cannot show any reason.
Right. There's no rationale to it.
So what that makes is the person who, or the systems that are doing that, it automatically puts them on the wrong side of the fence.
Gmail's the worst.
Gmail's the worst.
when they did their changeover, when was that, Crow? Maybe like early last year. I'm kind of forgetting. But it's so freaking slow now. I have a freaking amazing computer. I have an iMac Pro, and even on that, and very good internet connection, just so no one tries to challenge me on that. I have
Right.
very, very good in connection. I pay for the most bandwidth I can get where I live, and I have a phenomenal computer. And still, just to compose a message or any of that stuff, it always takes way longer than it used to since they did their quote unquote upgrade. It's because they're scanning, and every tiny little thing is being ripped apart and scrutinized. Gmail is absolutely the worst.
Before it leaves your box. And the proof of that is when they did the changeover Jason's referencing, all of a sudden these helpful little things you could respond with pop up at the bottom of your Gmail.
Yeah.
Like I'll get a message back, and all of a sudden their AI is so familiar with my conversation, they'll give me the responses that I should probably include.
It's like appearing in line with what you're typing.
Well, no,
right.
it's like
two different things. There's two things. That's one of them.
That's one of them. And then there's the little bubble where you can just click it. But the point here is that AI has already done it all, figured out what the conversation actually means, created a response that fits the context of the conversation. But anyone silly enough to click on those things is in fact providing that last bit of data indexing and collection that they are after. That in fact, my AI was right because they chose to use my response. And it also tells them you're a lazy ass human being, so you should pile more of this crap on me.
Yes, I feel like just the act of clicking it, it's like it might save you a few seconds, but now you're getting in this habit of like relying on an outside source to do your thinking for you.
Welcome to the future. It's only going to get worse from here until people demand better. And right now, one of our biggest problems will be that private corporations who are nearly bulletproof unless they violate the laws of corporation, which, by the way, they do all the time, but proving it or having enough money to ever try to use a court system, which is a bit of a joke at this point, those are the big problems. So what it comes down to is, does a human being demand their natural rights? Because that one simple thing, if every human being in the world sat down right now and made the decision, I will not allow my natural born human rights to be trampled on, all these systems begin to fall the hell apart because they are all designed to trample on your natural human rights and turn you into a basically corporation. You know, you're not a human being anymore. You're a person with a straw man identity and a social security number, and you're processed as a number, and you're processed as a statistical data set. And let me tell you something, when I was young, you were treated for the most part as a human being, and if you ever got pissed off at service providers, they usually bowed pretty quickly and said, sorry, the customer's always right. Those days are long gone, and the reason is because you're no longer viewed as a human being. You're just a statistical probability.
Yeah, it's true. It's disgusting. It's like, and that our natural rights, you know, like we have them, they're ours. Nobody can give them to us. We should demand that people respect them, but instead, it seems like they've completely brainwashed people into like begging for their natural rights to be taken away. You know, like people are begging for censorship right now, and they're begging for our guns to be taken away. And it's
that's what they show you to convince you that you're in the minority if you don't agree, which is a bunch of nonsense. But it's actually it's dark.
Good point.
It's darker than that actually, because a big premise by the controllers of this world is that if they do a thing and people don't push back against it and say no, then you have agreed. Endless systems that I could point at that people saw and didn't like but did nothing about are now viewed as having been accepted, and the idea of the Overton window plays into this. It's part of how the Overton window works, and how new things that people don't like are introduced and then slowly become mainstream and then slowly become expected. The main point here is your human rights, if you lose them for yourself. The first time something infringes on your human rights, you don't just let it go. You say no, hell no. And if you don't, then the powers that be take that as acceptance, and the ideas of this are written into Talmudic law and other places.
It's all done in increments, and if you look at the decades, there are things we'll put up with today that would be obscene to an American in the World War II era.
Yep.
Never in a million years. Those people would take arms against politicians if they tried to pull the nonsense that we take for granted today. That they just like, oh yeah, they spy on us.
Yeah. Yeah, we're reading V for Vendetta in my classroom, and we're talking about how there's cameras everywhere, and the government has, bugs in every room, and like everybody's being listened to and watched. And they were like, "Man, if governments were like this, like that would be bad." I'm like, our government is like that.
Well, it's actually
right
worse
now.
because it's not really our government. It is the power centers, corporations, alphabet agencies, any number of things that are non-governmental. And the reason it's set up for like that is because there's supposed to be recourse for Americans against their government, which really actually there's not in the way you think there is. Nobody ever voted a president into his seat. People don't do that. The Electoral College does that, and that's a rigged game. But to get back to the point, when you have a massive corporation that does things like this, first of all, who could, even if you could prove that Google had done some horrendous thing, who has the funds to take that to court?
Right.
Nobody. And so it's not just that things are rigged, they're absolutely set up so that pushback here or there will do nothing. But as a whole society, when people say, you know what, I'm fed up with this. What the hell right does YouTube have to tell me what I can say, do, or watch, or anything else? When that mindset becomes prevalent, then they've got a problem they can't just sweep under the rug. But they got some guy in Cincinnati that says, hey, man, you break the law and I'm taking you to court. They're kind of laughing because $100 billion would be pocket change. And
Right.
so, what are you going to do in a court in America or anywhere else that's basically driven by business? That's what courts are. They're businesses. They're engaged in business.
Yes, what I always say is do it anyway. Don't expect to win, but make as much noise as possible in the hopes that enough media will at least look at it and expose it to people. No guarantee anything's going to change, but at least that's the one shot you can get against them. These corporations want to, for the moment, still maintain a positive face to the public.
Yeah. Well,
and another key point I would throw in there is always conduct yourself in a way is correct. How many times have you seen in the news that this supposed acting politician was taken down because of an affair, right? So if you logically work that out, what they're trying to do is point out, well, this guy did the wrong thing, so he's getting what he had coming. So you can logically work out, well, what if that person didn't have the affair? Then what would be the leverage against him?
Right.
And so that is a critical thing for people to understand. When you are online, you never beef, you never fight, ever. When I was a child, I was told if you do something wrong, it'll go on your permanent record. And we used to laugh even back then because we knew there was no damn permanent record. You want to know something? Everything you do online is in a database, and it is in fact a permanent record. So if you conduct yourself with low language, cursing all the time, fighting with people, telling people to go die or other things, what you're doing is you're setting yourself up as a target who deserves to be hit from the point of view of the data collectors.
It's a really good point, and I am totally guilty of that. Like, you could take a lot of things I've said, and especially out of context, and be like, "Ah, she's a violent, horrifying person." So, when like I just let my lower self get the best of me in moments, especially before I was thinking much about these things, But this Facebook, for example, goes back to 2009 or so was probably when I got on it, and especially then, I'm sure I was.
Well, that's the thing. I can say the exact opposite, but I'm a bit old to be technical. I was old when I got my internet technology degree. Most of the people doing that first round of technology degrees for the internet were much younger than I was. But the point is I have not left a trail of things I need to be ashamed of or regret. I've consciously done the exact opposite. And that is the one foundational rule around any Crrow777 content is you do not beef online. You do not fight. You do not say negative things. And you sure as hell do not beef with anybody because it's low-minded.
Yeah.
Lindsay, it sounds like you have oppositional defiance disorder.
Right.
We've got all the records to prove it, and I don't think you need to own a handgun because you're dangerous, and we can prove that.
Exactly.
Yeah, think of all the mental the whole idea of mental health being the mechanism for gun control.
Yikes.
So wait a minute, let me get this straight. We take 100% of society, and the percentage of mentally defective people is so high, that's going to be a leveraging mechanism. And by the way, I would ask, how mentally deranged do you have to be to make up Sandy Hook?
Yeah.
So who's really mentally deranged here?
It's true. I mean, the broad way of describing mental illness, especially when mental illness is, there's no, how do you even say it? There's no material way to define if somebody is mentally ill or not. It's all subjective and it's all relative. And then, just depression even. It's like you just check off a little list and you're like, have you, are you sleeping in lately? Or are you like not taking as good a care of your body? And like, we all do that sometimes.
Yeah, ask your doctor if this drug might work for you. But by the way, if you have skin, you might not want to take this drug.
It might fall off.
Right. It's real, but think of older ideas like supposedly the American Indians, however that culture actually existed, a person that we would now call schizophrenic or mentally ill was viewed as being able to see some portion of this world no one else could.
Yeah, like a
and in some way they were venerated. So you can see what goes on in a civilization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it doesn't matter how ill you are though, because they've got a cybernetic sex doll to fulfill your every need.
That's right.
And they can also create video, audio of me doing anything they want, and it'll look convincing enough to make people believe that that's what I did, right?
Well, the video I saw yesterday proves that. It looked like a video game, but just real enough to fool people into thinking there was a shooting going on.
Oh, right. Wow, yeah. Do you think that was a
100% without beyond the reasonable shadow of doubt? That is fake nonsense. And I'll tell you another thing, that fake nonsense has been diminished in the United States, way diminished compared to where it was at its height, because so many people have caught on. But there's always a clue about where it happens and what community. This whole New Zealand nonsense, and there are people out there who slipped in a few words about it, but the point is censorship has come to such a level that if any of us go on and just flat out say, hey, the New Zealand thing was just more false nonsense made up by media, who, by the way, broke no law, because all the laws are now backing the fact that media is made up nonsense for agenda. But they're
allowed to lie to you. It's in the law too.
Propaganda is legal.
Well, yeah, of course it is. It's not just legal. There is no recourse from a legal standpoint. And not only that, they've blurred the lines between entertainment. It's just that the weak-minded human that actually thinks they're not looking at entertainment and there's some real thing called news somewhere who's completely deluded. But I would point out again, if you don't damn well know what the intent of news agencies, who are all owned by a couple of corporations, by the way, if you can't figure out that intent, then you got a lot of catching up to do. And once you do understand that intent, the next time they want to shove some nonsense in your face, your first reaction should be BS, prove it to me.
Right.
Your first reaction should be, I understand what you do for a living, you lie. So this is a lie until you can demonstrate it's not. And by the way, it is on you to demonstrate it's not. And by the way, your fancy video is demonstrative of nothing, because I saw Sandra Bullock and frickin' George Clooney go to space.
Yeah, true. And like, we even know that, I mean, this is the smallest bit about it, but AI can create faces that don't even exist. So that guy that supposedly did it might just be literally just fiction.
I'll tell you what, if I was a Hollywood A actor, I'd be worried, because very shortly, any A actor you see is going to be the Simone idea from that movie. Why would they deal with a person they have to pay and control, and, when they can just make it up in a computer? That's where we're headed. Not only that, I wouldn't be surprised if all the big actors that everyone knew and loved become the same popular actor generation after generation after generation, because they can just make it in a computer.
Right.
You want your John Wayne 200 years from now? Here he is. Latest John Wayne movie just came out.
I've been saying for years that you're going to see new episodes of the original Star Trek someday, and probably not that far in the future.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I'm sure that and what's funny about that is, like, the original Star Trek, it's not that damn good. It's like the original Batman. It's cheesy, it's campy, and it's been blown up to be this amazing thing. But at the root of what it actually was 1966, when they were going to indoctrinate the minds of the world into what space should look like, into what space travel should look like. And by the way, in a couple years, we're doing the moon landing. That's what Star Trek, the first Star Trek, was about. And anyone can logically get there if they take the time, but it's anything but good. Nostalgic, sure. Fun to remember, sure. But good? No, I got news for you. The Gorn is not good.
Well, even nostalgia, it's like nostalgia, I feel like, is its own trap, because you're like, oh, it used to be so much better like this, and really it's not.
It's a mind weapon. Nostalgia. Yeah. Jason and I did an episode right around the time my YouTube channel got deleted in the fall of 2017. We were pointing out that the Mandalay Bay nonsense was nonsense. So many people couldn't figure that out or were afraid to say anything. So we did that. But one of the things we had just covered was different kinds of programming and mind control, and nostalgia is one of those things. I think we even took a quote, a very valid quote from the Book of Samurai, that says basically, everyone would love to go back to the spirit of 100 years ago, but guess what? That time's gone and you can't go back there. So you might as well live where you are.
Yeah. And even the people in 100 years ago were wishing that they could go back.
That's the point. That's the point he makes. And not only that, we took it a step further. We said, what do you think is behind when you get in your car and there's a 70s station and an 80s station and a 60s station and a big band? You know, that what that is doing is targeting this nostalgia for the age group. And so what has become known is when people are young, the music that they grow up with, that is the most powerful tool ever, because when they get older and they hear that, it's going to bring them back. And now that can be used as a mind weapon. So Jason and I are here to tell you in our lifetimes, what's become of music is almost turned music into non-music.
It's horrifying.
Well, rap is not music. Music has melody, harmony, complexity. So most of rap is not that. And even the rap that does have it is often sampling it from some other time.
Yeah.
The point is, it's become this very low-minded thing that people are convinced to have value. But nonetheless, the people that grew up with it, another 30 years from now, they're going to trot out Tupac, and everyone's going to remember their youth. And then that Tupac is going to be used to skew their perception.
It's for sure. And I have this thing, you've given me like more reason to hate it, because I'll go like to the store or to a restaurant and they're playing these songs and it's like, I've heard this song a million times in my life, and there's apparently maybe 7 billion humans and lots of them are making music and they have been for thousands of years. Like, why this song a million times? Can we please just listen to anything that I haven't heard before?
I've addressed this so many times and people don't catch on. There's a reason why the first time you heard Hotel California, it hit your ear differently.
Yeah.
You've been convinced that it was just this freak of nature and the right chords and the right sound and all this. No. When you hear songs like Hotel California and Stairway to Heaven and those epic, timeless, iconic songs, there is something in that music that you probably don't even want to know about. But that doesn't even start to touch when we get to the point where we are now. There's a place that I go to, and they're always playing versions of rap, and it like the whole public is in there, and I'll walk in there and they're just referring to women as bitches or sex slaves. Everyone is a nigger. All these things that are basement minded are being lifted up as if they are part of the social discourse. In fact, what's happening is we're all being turned into a bunch of gutter sluts. Basically. We've all agreed to jump into the filth. And when I hear it, it's like it's grating on me. There's no harmony, there's no melody. But just even if I was going to look beyond that and say, okay, this is some other form of art, the words being used are shameful. Yeah. Shameful.
It is.
It's a droning beat, and it's programming you. Watch somebody who's into it. Watch them bob their head.
Yep.
Look at the look in their eyes, because I've done this. I used to work in music retail, and I know what these people are like. And it's.
Not that Jason and I had it any better than in our youth. It's just that there were fewer steroid shots put into that music.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
they've gotten better at it. They've gotten much better at how to manipulate people.
damn right.
You
All the
think
things.
it was by accident that in the early '90s they started pushing rap in a major way, and all of a sudden, butt rock, all the hair stuff from the '80s got pushed off to the side, and like, oh no, we got something much better to play with now.
Not only that, they try to falsify the history of rap. They try to make it look like it was around and mattered longer than it did. As a matter of fact, I'm old enough to remember that. I remember the first day MTV came out. Everyone was waiting. It was going to be a big deal. We had to go to a friend's house who was actually in an area that could get cable. That's how far back we're talking.
Yeah.
And MTV wouldn't play anything but rock and roll, and almost all of it was white rock. Finally, there was a little color. I think Rick James finally kicked down the door as one of the main men of color who finally got on there, but there was no damn rap, and that didn't show up for quite a while. But now when you look at the history of rap, they try to push it back to the early 80s and make an act as if it mattered more than in some regional context of some city. And this is all manipulation, and hell yes, they used the same tricks and maybe worse ones when you start to look at what was put into Beatles music, all that subliminal programming and backmasking. That was all based on things they learned from people like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. These people had a direct hand in this kind of mental warping of societies. It went into TV, but Jason's point is very valid. Yeah, we were programmed as badly as anyone back in our 60s and 70s and 80s rock and roll. Point is they've gotten a lot better at it, and just the droning nature of rap allows the programming to be amped up, even if that was the only new thing about it, which it's not, because now digital recording and what they can hide in it, the frequencies, the pulse rates, all of it have improved, and it is all a mental warping mind show.
You
Think
do
of it like a flicker rate that's much slower. That's what rap is.
Yeah. Yep.
Weird. So, and like Jason, like you were saying, that it's like people become instantly some other identity when they're listening to some of this music. Like you see it comes on and then they just become, it's weird. It's like they've abandoned, themselves, and they're like lost in that, whatever that persona that's created or that energy that's created by that song is. And
then they want to become it. I saw so many wannabe rappers coming through my store, and they all want to do the same thing. All of them. It was just pathetic.
There's no originality.
Well, there's even so much more. Like Jason and I have done some episodes on cymatics. For people who don't understand what that is, it's basically the old alchemical or natural science, I'll call it natural science, of vibration. And it's known that certain vibrations can be found in nature, are beneficial to a human body, and even how modern music came to be when they switched the orchestral tuning of A, when they switched it from 4-3-2, which is from the Fibonacci sequence, probably better for a living being to be exposed to. They changed it to 440. And that even runs into the numerology of the supposed values of 4 and 4. But the point is, there is no modern music that is not using the most abusive of frequencies and tones. That's also why you can't find much on cymatics anymore. If you try to do a study on cymatics now online, it's almost impossible to get anything back that matters.
It's really interesting to see the types of things that you can no longer find on Google or YouTube very easily.
Going to get worse, and Amazon and all these other places that are now the owners of the printed word have actively been reducing what they will allow to be sold. So when we get to the Fahrenheit 451 days, those are going to be the culprits. And Amazon is already whole hog into the censorship of endless titles.
This is why part of my abandonment of my current life and my creation of a new life, I'm thinking about starting a bookstore, because I want to have the paper copies of the stuff that people will need to have access to once everything digital has been completely locked down.
Well,
yes, you want to do that.
Yeah, you should. Hopefully we don't make it to Fahrenheit 451 where the fire department shows up to light a fire with your books.
I mean, that's the other thing. I think
that's far away.
Find me and shut it down. But, we'll do the best we can.
Actually, I shouldn't have even said that. That shouldn't even be a consideration. It's the right thing to do, so do it.
I like that.
That's a better way.
So do we have time to get into the second sun idea before we get into the shoot the moon?
Go ahead.
Okay, so what I haven't listened to any of your content yet, but I've heard a lot of buzz about this second sun idea, and I know a lot of people have thought about it before and just passed it off. But I feel like once Crow says something might be true, that carries a lot of weight for people. So, do you want to let people in on what you're thinking about it?
Well, the first thing that I'm thinking is it means what it means until a lot more people take a look. If I'm correct, they should know about where to look and about what to look for. And it'll be like the Lunar Wave. Hopefully it doesn't take as long. I think it was a year and a half before I shot the second Lunar Wave. So it was kind of a miserable couple years before finally other people started to shoot it and they quit accusing me of faking it. But it makes perfect sense. And we have done enough research, and we were looking at Falconelli when I read a certain quote that all of a sudden it was like an aha moment. But it's likely what's being shown in all the Masonic tracing boards and in a lot of the older esoteric art and places like that. So I think it's quite possible that I'm at least in the right ballpark, maybe better than that.
Watch the David Bowie video Black Star from his last album, but turn the volume off.
Yeah, there you go. Or for that matter, go to Tatooine.
Don't let the weaponized sound affect you, but let the visuals teach you.
Well, it'll distract you too, because I did it to myself. Because I'm a musician and a recording engineer, my analytical mind automatically starts dissecting stuff. So I watched it again and turned the volume off, and all I did was watch the imagery and how it was all put together. And I was like, yeah.
Interesting. Because, yeah, so do you think that has any connection with Saturn then? Because the other time that I've heard of a second sun, it's been connected with like a sun that was kind of gone dark or something, and that's what Saturn is?
I think that's all allegory, and who can know what the earlier time was. But part of the mystery behind Saturn is that if you're a low-minded, not very high society, Saturn is going to be cruel, cruel, cruel. It's going to beat you to the turf every time you get it wrong, and a low society gets it wrong every day. The flip side of that idea is that in an enlightened society, Saturn would be nothing but bliss and great. But when to maybe more broadly answer that, you can view each of the luminaries as a slice of the pie. The two biggest slices of the pies for us is the sun and the moon. And what I pointed out in the double sun episode is there may be a higher source powering those two particular slices, but each other luminary is like a slice of the pie that adds to the complexity of our system, or is a way to measure these, I don't even know how to say it, these potentialities, these forces of nature. Maybe that's a good way to say it. It's almost like you can look at the luminaries like a clock. In the same way I know at 6 a.m. it's, the sun's coming up. Clock told me that, not only nature. And I know at noon, oh, well, it's going to be as hot as it gets today. The sky clock does that in overarching long cycles of time. But according to the old adepts, if you understand the sky clock, then you begin to be able to decipher the influences for any given period of time. So Saturn would just be one slice or one little part of that overarching idea.
So does the second sun fit in with any accepted astrological models that are ancient, or is it totally separate?
No, because even if you go back to super old ideas like Hermetic ideas, or even in the like the Masonic tracing boards, the all-seeing eye, if you ever look at those artworks or the as above, so below idea, it's in the as above, so below idea, it's literally like our consciousness is building two places at once. What happens above, and that's a perfect reflection of what happens below. So that's kind of like the idea. There's a source for the sun and moon at a higher plane, but on the tracing board, you'll often see the whole top is clouds with a hole and this light coming through, lensing off our sun, and then the light coming from our sun is again lensed down to us. All kinds of artwork showing these types of ideas.
Well, it definitely fits into the concept of the triune God that you see reflected.
That's right.
In just about everything. So while in Christianity it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, we're talking about the sun, the moon, and the second son.
Give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to mute my mic and use the restroom real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
So the do you have any ideas, Jason, since Saturn came up, about how they're saying that Saturn's rings are disappearing faster than they ever expected, which I didn't even know they expected them to disappear? Like getting past whether or not that's an actual space, like place that we could go in physical space. What do you think that all would mean?
Well, as far as mainstream astronomy, which I'm actually very familiar with, I was really into it for many, many, many years. So, which actually gives me a great basis to work from when I'm looking at these more esoteric concepts.
Yeah.
It's always been understood that a planet with rings, it would dissolve eventually just due to motion and gravity. Like the planet would be drawing it in slowly but surely over the years. That's the concept. So yeah, eventually they would go away.
Okay.
But as far as but have you noticed that they've been releasing a couple of unusual statements lately? That the Saturn's rings is just one of them. Maybe there's an implication of a binding spell there being released. I don't know.
Yeah,
but that's one way you can look at it. But how about this thing with the rings? Has always been the concept of a binding spell, absolutely. But there's also the thing with the Earth's atmosphere is much bigger than we ever thought, and the moon is in fact inside Earth's atmosphere, technically speaking.
Right.
All of a sudden. So
that, I mean, that gives kind of a more weight to all of the people who would be on the sort of flat Earth side of things, or at least the construct side of things, or the side of things that says that the real nature of this reality is hidden from us. But do you think that, I mean, what do you think they're trying to accomplish with that?
To kind of, well, for one, to keep people guessing that you don't really understand things. But it seems like with the atmosphere thing, there's the concept from a lot of the alternative Earth models, I guess you could say, because neither Crrow nor myself subscribe to anything in particular. We just see inconsistencies and try to figure out what's going on.
Yes.
But there is, of course, the concept that the Earth and the sun and the moon are in Earth's atmosphere. They're much closer. That's concepts trying to tell us something here.
Right. So they're like giving away the lie to some extent. But it's interesting.
There's some strange karmic thing.
Go ahead.
There seems to be some strange karmic thing that they have what's going on.
Oh, you're cutting up a little bit.
Yeah.
It got a little fuzzy there for a while. It came in and out. I don't know if we can hear you anymore.
I'm back.
I think we had a little conversation with Jason while you were gone about Saturn's rings and whether or not they're binding spells, and the fact that NASA has come out and said that they're disappearing. So maybe that's a release of some of these binding spells. And then sounds like Jason is getting a little choppy now.
Yeah, I can't hear Jason at all now.
Yeah. But I do want to talk to you guys about Shoot the Moon before we are finished today. Uh-oh. I think we're...
Jason, we're totally losing your audio. It's not even legible.
I think it's
I'm not saying anything.
I think it's lagging a little bit too.
There he is. That sounded better.
Maybe it'll get better. Well, let's get into Shoot.
I see it. You guys have a problem.
Okay. Let's get into Shoot the Moon and see what you guys. So you have a full feature, well produced, excellently shot film coming out called Shoot the Moon. And when exactly is it coming out? It's really soon, right? Like within a month or two?
April 5th.
April 5th. Oh,
in New Orleans will be the premiere. Jason's lining up. We're not 100% sure on venue, but Jason's also going to tour it. He has a whole projection system and a big old screen that he set up at LSU, sent me images of, the movie on the big screen. Everything Jason shot, which is primarily the interviews of me and Randy from Houston, is, hyper HD quality. The things from the telescope, people will be familiar with the different systems I used on my early YouTube work, which, by the way, I will be getting back into more telescopic filming as we warm up here. There were reasons that I just couldn't. Physically didn't matter what I wanted. I couldn't do it. But I kind of keep my personal life personal. But the movies, if I had never had anything to do with this and someone showed it to me, it would be very interesting to me. And I think it has real promise for that reason.
Definitely. I'm really excited for people to be exposed to this. I'm really excited to be able to see it myself. And I know that you said that you want maybe people to do, like Jason's going to do this traveling screening thing, which is really awesome. Are you looking for people to volunteer venues, or I feel like there was something to it.
Go ahead, Jason. Are you?
Yeah, no, I can hear you guys. Yeah, the idea is if people have a place for us to go, especially a home. That's why I got the projection system. If they have a home that's big enough and we can get a decent audience that wants to attend, we can do a screening and I will speak, and possibly if the time allows, we might even be able to get Crow in on like a Skype kind of thing on my laptop, and we can all have a conversation. The whole idea is to network and be able to make this feel like a more together community by not just watching the film together, but drinking coffee together and being able to see each other in person finally.
Yeah, and connect. And I feel like just like other people like Freeman has experienced, as you're moving around and you're having all these people come together to watch this and experience this, and those people will realize that they're all there together. And even after you leave, they can continue to be together. So that's a very powerful.
It'll be interesting to see what becomes of this film. It is tasteful, it is honest, it is researched, it is based on real footage from a real telescope. But at the end of the day, it is challenging so many things that the average person in this part of the world thinks are true, like whatever NASA says, or what are the sun and moon? What are these things we see in the sky? Are there aliens? It addresses all these things head on and honestly. And, I don't expect anyone to accept a thing just because I've said it, but I would hope that they would go out and challenge the idea, see if there's value there. But this was not done on a whim, and it's not being pulled out of a hat. This is the narrative that we have arrived at with all the research that I've done, everything Jason's done, and we've tried to lay it down in as professional a manner as two guys like us can do. And make it worth someone's while. But I would say, again, I'm not even aware of another place you could go in the world to see that many strange things filmed through a telescope.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting. And so is it going to be digitally like handed out to people if they purchase it, or like if they had a theater that was interested in showing it, how would they possibly get a hold of it? Or is it going to be primarily Jason taking it as he goes around? Jason?
I think it's going to be manyfold. We can certainly do DVDs and Blu-rays. At some point, there will be a digital download from Crrow777radio.com. That digital download will probably have to wait till the movie's been out a while because anyone can understand the problems that could be introduced. But as well, yeah, if the theater is willing to show this, it's not a problem. Jason rendered this in formats that will accommodate that.
Cool.
So any which way, I guess, is the answer.
Awesome. Is there a place that people can go to get connected with all of that?
I would say the best place is probably Jason and Rose on Facebook. And why don't you tell them, Jason?
Yeah, we have the Facebook groups. There's Crrow777 Radio, and then there's the Crrow777 Radio discussion group. Everyone's welcome to join in on those. Rose and I interact on a very regular basis with an ever-growing group of people there that are fantastic. It's the best group I've ever seen ever on a social media platform like that. And
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, my earbuds are dying. Also, yeah, the whole idea is we're going to try and get into theaters, especially like art house kind of places that would have an interest in something that's alternative.
Right.
The movie itself, and I've said this to quite a few people now, there's so many unusual objects that Crow shot. I could throw out 3/4 of them and still have more than an entire season of some crap that's on the History Channel.
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing. Like, the stuff is there. If you do the work, and Crow took 4 years of his life dedicated to doing this, and this was the result. It's insane what he's captured.
I am so excited for that. I think anybody who hears about this that's even loosely related to any of these communities is so excited about this. And then, Jason, I've heard that you have some sort of crowdfunding going on. Is that true?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, we did a GoFundMe for the initial amount that we kind of shot a little low on, but we thought it was a reasonable number, which we did hit. We're slightly over it. We're leaving it up for now because as long as donations keep coming in, that just means I can afford to travel to more places.
Yeah.
And the big thing is I would love to go overseas, and that's where the real expense would start coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So driving places and staying in hotels and things like that, that's got its own cost, but it's not nowhere near as bad as if I've got multiple people asking me to come to the UK and Australia.
And maybe Malaysia.
Very possibly. Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Oh, sorry. Indonesia. My bad.
Well, we've got people that we know that may get us into film festivals in south of Spain. There's a few places, but I was going to add something there. Oh yeah, Jason, you should tell people where the funding, where they can find the funding thing is, if they want to.
It's GoFundMe, and it's just Shoot the Moon. And my name is Jason Lindgren, Lindgren. Any of those keywords should pull it all up.
Cool. I'm excited for people to give more so this can get further, because that's what we really want, is not only for people to get their minds opened by seeing all this content, but also to connect to each other in doing so.
Well, we're doing other things too. Just give me half a second here, Jason. Like I just added a shop link to Crrow777radio.com, and the reason for it is because there's t-shirts and things that people can get that have the web address. Since we're being so heavily censored online, any person who gets a t-shirt goes out into the world, and that's not censorable in the same way. And hopefully that will drive it. But what were you going to say, Jason?
The whole point behind anything, I know a lot of folks don't like the concept of asking for money.
Mm-hmm.
It's just especially the way the mainstream has a complete clamp down and everything.
Right.
They would never, if I tried to pursue a mainstream route, if I was foolish enough to even waste my time doing that, never in a million years would be allowed out. So we're trying to use whatever funds we get in to play like the big boys do without having to get in bed with the goblins.
Yes. And it's the same with the merchandise you're talking about. It's not like you're trying to cash in on people and like get rich on selling stuff. You're trying to get the word out, and that merchandise helps spread the word.
Well,
I promise you, we're not getting rich off it.
Right.
Yeah, you're never going to get rich on t-shirts. The whole reason for that was to get, like, I did it once before because people asked, and I just walked away from it. It was more hassle than it was worth. Things costed more than I thought they should, even when there was no markup, so I wasn't making a penny. But we found a better place. Teespring is where the Crrow777 shop is, but each design has the web address on it. And that is the main thing, because truly people have no idea. When they took out my YouTube channel in the fall of 2017, the day before they did it, if you put Crrow777 in a search engine, there were 16 or more million returns on the name.
Wow.
When they finally put my channel back some 3 weeks later, which they never told me they did, they gave me a copyright strike. And I said, how can I get a copyright strike? I don't have a channel.
You have 100% of your own content.
Yeah, but the thing is the day that they put me back, I did a search for my name. There were 6,000 returns. So down from multiple millions. To this day, depending on your geography, if you do a search for Lunar Wave, you can sometimes clear 1 million returns, which is a fraction of what it used to be. But if you add Crrow777 to Lunar Wave, it goes down to about 20,000.
That's insane.
So that's what we're up against. We have been scrubbed from the internet, basically.
And there's some extent basically, if they're trying to hide it from you, that's exactly what you should be looking for. And there's some cases where they know that that's the mentality that some people have, and so they make it seem like something's being hidden so that you'll go after it and accept it more. But this is one of those cases where that's not what's happening. You really should be pursuing this knowledge.
Well, the proof is in the pudding. Jason and I just went on a YouTube channel, which is massive, over 500,000 followers, called Sergeant Report, primarily a politically driven channel. And we brought our typical point of view, and the response was overwhelming. So many open-minded people, so many people just starving to death for information like this. So it goes to show you why they are making it impossible to search me or know about what we're doing here. And for my part, the information has proved itself valid. So where it goes from here, I'm not sure. but it has value and it has meaning. It's worthwhile content.
Yes, agreed. Well, is there any final words that you guys want to give to the people listening to kind of wrap things up or send them in a certain direction?
Anything you want to add, Jason?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody, as always, for supporting us the way they have. It's hard to know sometimes what our reach really is because of the massive shadow banning that's going on these days. A few years ago, you'd know Crrow777 is a huge name worldwide. Now all of a sudden, it's like you just don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a fact. And the website, Crrow777radio.com, the about page, that was written in like 2013 or 14. I knew then where censorship was headed. So those words had never changed, and that was set up as a free speech zone. So the whole idea of becoming a member there, or the reoccurring members, which are actually what allow us to exist, that is a milestone built in stone. That is an outpost that has been built against the tide that's coming in against us all. And it is respectful, it is well researched, and we endeavor to hold the bar at a level that's almost impossible to hold the bar at. We've been doing it for a long time now. The point is if you want something more than drivel, you might want to come check us out.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, if we're thinking in the Eyes Open group on Facebook that we have, is where like, at some point we're going to get deleted or we're all being censored anyway. So what else can we do? And like, maybe this is an option for us, is that we all join up with the community you already have going, and you have your own bastion of free speech, like you're saying, where people can interact with each other and share information in hopefully a lot less easily targetable way.
Well, without word of mouth and private websites, everything is stacked against us until people begin to demand better.
Right.
But there is a massive community of people out there who are fed up to their eyeballs. Even mainstream places, when they're exposed to what we're laying down, they're like, whoa, and they come and they check it out and they thank us. And some express they had no idea. Some people say I knew it. But the point is that word of mouth and those private websites, that's the wave of the future. It's the only possible wave of the future, because YouTube, it's jumped the shark. Facebook, it's a CIA front. We know what these places are, and they're no longer valuable anywhere near what they once were.
Right. And it's like, maybe you can grab a few people on the way out, I guess, but it's probably time to get out.
There's no country in the world with an internet connection that's not aware of Crrow777 or the Lunar Wave. So when you look at the ridiculous numbers that are bandied about on Facebook or YouTube, you're looking at made up nonsense. And I can prove it outright. I have years of analytics, and what's come of it is I had reached a point where every day, minimally, I picked up 100 subscribers. And now I pick up maybe 10 subscribers in a day. Not only that, every day we do an upload, which historically meant all numbers jumped. Now I go into negative numbers every Thursday when I put up a show, negative numbers.
Crazy.
So it's complete wholesale destruction of free thought. So anyone listening, you should make a decision. Are you about free speech and free thought, or are you okay with corporations trampling us to the damn dust?
And what are you going to do about it?
Well, what I would ask that you give up one latte a month and subscribe to us, because that's actually the thing that keeps us going.
It's true. And if you don't drink lattes, just give up whatever else is worth a latte.
Well, people have no idea. Almost everybody who runs a podcast uses a streaming server. I got notified over a year ago that all the streaming servers were going to United Nations laws put forth in Europe by the European Union, and that I was, if any person in that part of the world listened to my content, I was now subject to their laws. This is what I did. I shut down all my streaming services. I took hundreds of hours of content. I shifted it to a private server, which is a royal pain to serve your own content. And it's cost, you got to pay for that. And I shifted it all to my private zone. So we are not only doing what we do, but we are serving the content free of, suppose somehow European Union law applies to me because someone in London listened to my show. We've done everything we can. And the truth is owning a private website and trying to serve your own content is not free, and it's not easy. As a matter of fact, it keeps me busy 10 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yes, I believe it. There's very few people out there who deserve our money as much as you guys do. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, it's not much money. It's a cup of coffee, basically.
Right.
For a month. For a month.
We can do it. All right, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to Crow. Crow, thank you for being here today.
Faye, thanks for having me.
And according to Jason, thank you for coming today as well.
Well, thank you.
Reality is a strange playground of endless iterations of madness on every side of us. We've got 5G, AI, elaborate control structures, mind control, false constructs, hidden celestial bodies, and an enslaving money game that was built to keep us down. Sometimes it's hard to keep our heads up when we look at just how rigged this plane really is. But then again, there are endless iterations of beauty all around us too. We can find them in nature. We've got connections to one another, and the networks we build can be used to keep one another alive, sane, thriving, and bounding joyfully into the future, no matter what it holds. If we shoot for the moon, intentional, we'll land amongst the stars, right? So keep your hearts connected, your heads up, your eyes open, and as always, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.